Hello, everyone. My name is Yulong, and this is Tim. We are from Baidu X Lab. Baidu is the Chinese largest internet company. You can think it as Chinese Google. And X Lab is short of security lab. So in the past, we have spent a lot of effort digging kernel vulnerabilities. Later, we realized that we need an effective and efficient way to patch the vulnerabilities. So here is the outline of our talk. We will first introduce the Android kernel vulnerability landscape and talk about the current problems. And Tim will give an introduction of our solution to the problems. And later we will talk about how to establish the ecosystem. So as everyone knows, kernel vulnerabilities are dangerous. So there are two types of vulnerabilities. The first one can cause information leak. And the second one can cause code execution in kernel mode. So by combining those vulnerabilities, an unprivileged user can gain the root privilege to launch dangerous attacks. So the threats of kernel vulnerabilities comes in two folds. And first, most security mechanisms of Android relies on the kernel integrity. So for example, the app isolation, the process isolation. If the kernel is broken, the malicious app can peek into the other app's memory or even control it. And the payment mechanism relies on the kernel integrity as well. So is the fingerprint framework. And also the crypto framework, more specifically the key store relies on the kernel integrity. And there are many other user-land security mechanisms strictly rely on the kernel integrity. From the other side, the trust zone, which is a level lower than kernel, will also be threatened if the kernel is compromised. Because if kernel is compromised, more attack surfaces will be exposed. The attacker can use some kernel input that trust zone trusts to attack the trust zone. So there have been a lot of talks about this, so we won't elaborate it. So here is the list of recent kernel vulnerabilities reported in Android Security Bulletin. So you can see that the number is increasing. The red ones are privilege escalation bugs, and the blue one is information leakage bugs. So you can see that most of the bugs are privilege escalation bugs, which is severe. And from the growing trends of the number, we can draw two conclusions at least. The first is more and more attentions are paying on the securing the kernel because more and more resources and people are analyzing the problems. And the second one is that more and more vulnerabilities are in the end-day exploit arsenal for the underground businesses. Because the bad guys also know there are so many vulnerabilities to exploit. To name a few, this one is quite famous. It's called Tower Root. It can root almost all Android at that time. So this is due to the filter queue function in the kernel does not ensure the calls have two different fulltext addresses. Another one is the Pimpin Root, which is also quite famous. It is due to the ping unhash function does not initialize a certain list of data structure during your unhash operation. So this can also lead to kernel privilege escalation. And the most recent famous one is the pipe root. There is actually no official name for this. It was reverse engineered from the king root and got exposed to the public. So the problem is that the pipe read and pipe write implementations in the kernel allows local users to cause the privilege escalation. So to be noted, this is a known issue in the upstream kernel that was fixed in April 2014, but it wasn't called out as a security fix and assigned a CVE ID. So Google Android AOSP didn't fix it until most recently. What's worse, for those CVEs, many of them have already got public POC. So which means even the script kiddies can directly use the code to write exploits. So here are some examples that can be found on GitHub. There are also many exploits made public, but never got officially reported or disclosed before being patched, or not get timely fixed. So this is a sentence quoted from our academic paper from CCS last year. So the authors found that there are at least 10 device driver exploits that are never reported from the famous root app. So everyone can reverse engineer the root apps and copy the exploits. But these apps are never reported, which means the vendor didn't realize the existence of them. And this is from the Google Chrome security team. So the words are quite small, so I read it out. So they found a bug, but the bug didn't get patched for more than 6 months. So still affects the devices out there. So this kind of exploit is disclosed, but not get timely fixed. So with the existence of so many vulnerabilities and they're unpatched, they leave quite a lot of threats to the public. So there are already many malware and adware with root exploits. For example, the Chemi family. The Chemi malware family mimics the popular benign apps, as shown here. Some of them are quite popular, like Talking Tom, Light Browser, or even the calculator. So by uploading this fake app to the third-party app store, the attacker tries to root the victim's phone using 8 root exploits that are publicly known. And after gaining root, the attacker tries to remote control the devices. So from the infecting map, you can see it's worldwide infected. And another example similar to this is the ghost push. So more than 30 apps are faked as the attacker's samples. And more than 3,600 brands and 14,000 types of phones have been infected. Over 600,000 phones are being infected each day. So this has a broad impact. And the most recent incident is this, the dark Spectres. So the most special characteristic of this sample is that it uses the hacking team's exploit, which essentially uses the field text exploit. So there are many cases like this. The exploits are public, but the devices are not patched. So what causes the problem? Devices got unpatched forever or for a long period. And it is quite difficult for vendors or for the whole ecosystem to patch them. So why? Before digging into this question, this problem, let's think about another question. People are always saying that iOS is more secure than Android. Is that true? Well, by comparing the vulnerability frequency, you can see that that's not true. So there are 2 tables listing here. The left is for iOS and the right is for Android. And the period is almost the same. From August 2015 to the 2 or 3 months ago. So you can see there are almost the same bugs frequency. But why people are saying that iOS is more secure? Because if Apple wants to patch a vulnerability, Apple can patch it in time, because Apple controls the entire supply chain, from hardware to software, and Apple has the has the source code, and also the only copy of the source code. Apple doesn't have to concern like, oh, I have this model, I have that model. Different models have different source code. No. So if Apple wants to fix the bug, it has only one copy of source code to fix. So the time window is quite short. And also Apple refuses to sign old versions. So there is no way for end users to revert the iOS version back to an old version. So it is less likely for the user to revert to a vulnerable version. And also, all the iOS devices can get a timely update. For Android, this is not the same. This is not the case. There are two causes. The first cause is the long patching chain. So from the first day, if some researchers found a vulnerability, they report it to Google. It takes months for Google to finalize the patch. And then Google has to notify the vendors to test and to take the patch. And after the vendors testing, it has to send the patch to carriers. The carrier has to test the patches again for stability issues and many other issues. And after 3 months or more, they can finally approve the patch and send out the OTA, over-the-air update. But for customers, if they receive the OTA, they may not click the button and update the device in time. So for this long patching chain, because each party may belong to a different company, they have their own interest, this patching chain is quite long in terms of the patching time window. And another problem is the device fragmentation. So this picture is taken from the opensignal.com. So you can see there are so many vendors, so many phone models out there. So if there is a problem in the kernel, you have to deal with so many models. You have to port the patches to so many models. This is a tedious work. And let's take a look at Google's own stats to see how bad the situation is. So Lollipop was released in November 12, 2014. But 60% of the devices are still older than that. The stats was taken on April 4th, 2016. And also, Google stopped patching for Android older than 4.4, but 26.2% of the devices are still older than that. So for those devices, there is no way to get OTA update. And Chinese market is even worse. We all know that China blocks Google. And there are many Chinese-specific vendors providing phones in China. So the stats showing on this slide is taken from devices with Baidu apps installed. So we can see that 82.8% of the devices are older than Lollipop. And 40.4% of the devices are older than 4.4. Since we are talking about the kernel vulnerability, so let's see the stats of the kernel especially. So we all know that if the build time of the kernel is older than the vulnerability notification date, there is no way for the kernel to take the patch. So we are trying to gather the stats of the kernel's build time. We're not saying that if the kernel is older than the vulnerability notification date, it is for sure to be vulnerable. But this can be approximate stats. So for the tower root, from the data gathered on May, which is this month, 55% of the devices are not vulnerable, which means they have newer build time stamp than the date where this vulnerability got fixed. However, the remaining devices are older than this date, which means it is highly likely that they are vulnerable. They are not patched. For Pimpin Root, the situation is worse. So 88% of devices are older than the vulnerability notification date. And for the CVE 2015-1805, almost 100% of the devices are older than the vulnerability notification date. So which means the majority of the devices out there could be vulnerable. So the fragmentation causes the second problem, the capability mismatching. For the phone vendors, they understand their phone the best. They have the privilege to apply the patches as well. And with source code, it is easy to adapt the patches to all the models. However, their main concern is not the security of their devices. So they may not apply enough resources to discover and patch the vulnerabilities. For security vendors, they are capable to discover the patch and fix them, but they are not privileged enough. They have to root the device first and to apply the kernel patches. And without source code, it is hard to adapt the patches to all the phone models. So this causes the bad situation where the phone vendors understand the problem, but their first priority is not fixing the problems. The security vendors care about this, but it is so challenging for them to fix the problems. For Google really did a good job on trying to protect the ecosystem. They are building the security bulletin. They're trying to push the OTAs in time. They're trying to push the vendors to take the patches. But as we have said, the vendors, there is a long patching chain. And also in some areas like China, there is no Google. So the situation is still very bad. Given this bad situation, who to protect and how to protect the payment fingerprint frameworks on the Android phone? Well, it is hard. So we are trying to provide a solution for this. So which is our work, adaptive kernel patching. So Tim will give some details of how we do this, how we achieve adaptive kernel length patching. So welcome, Tim.
Thanks, Yulong. Kernel length patching is actually not a very new idea. You guys probably have heard of K-graft, K-patch, this kind of thing. Like a K-graph, it just replace the buggy function with a new one. So when you call the function, all the call chain will be forward to the fix function, of course with bugs fixed. Because patching kernel is a very sensitive thing. Because sometimes a minor, a very minor mistake will make the kernel crash. So we need to pay more attention to that. For example, you cannot allow the original buggy function and fix function running together. For example, running in a for loop, right? This will cause very bad results. Also, you can use soft machine and stack backtrace to check if the buggy function is running in the system at this time. If that case, you should avoid to patch at that time. As for patching, Keypad will use AppTrace mechanism to do the whole patch thing. Oh, I already talked about this slide. For trying for a third party to do the patching, because like a Keygraph or Keypatch, this kind of solutions, they require source code of the kernel you're going to fix. And sometimes it's very hard to get the source code of the kernel because some vendors they just don't they just keep their source code private. You cannot just get them very easily. And another problem is that you cannot directly patch apply your patch to apply a patch across different kernel builds because Linux kernel itself has very strict limitations, and also vendors have their own limitations. They don't allow custom codes to be loaded into the system very easily. So here comes the question: how we can load the kernel into the load the code into the kernel adaptively. Here comes our solution. We have 3 steps. The first step is we need to gather some kernel information like symbol address and CRC, and also we need to change a little bit about change some data structures, make sure it will fit for every different kernels. And second step is to patch the payload. Currently, we're using a kernel module and shellcode to do the patching thing. And the third step is to replace the vulnerable functions or hooked vulnerable function, so we can fix the whole thing. Here's about how we get the kernel information. Generally, we have a lot of different ways. to get all of them, like proc version, proc KO symbols, and other kernel modules. Um, but the best place to get all the information is from boot image, because boot image is like a gold mine. It has every different information in it. So what we do is to decompress the boot image. It probably is compressed with gzip or bzip. It's kind of a compression method. And the most common one is gzip, but the latest kernel will use LZO. It's a very fast, decompression method. Some kernel images are just a raw machine code, or sometimes are even in alpha files. Before we do the project, we did some research on our customer devices. We gathered some data from them, and we found out over 95% of the user device have the ability to load the kernel module, and over 60% of the memory devices have the ability to write code into the kernel memory. So if we do this, combine them together, we can patch over 99% of the user devices. There are still less than 1% of devices that we can not do anything about. But actually, we have other ways. We can use some kind of stable vulnerabilities to do that. Like we can root the device first, then we during the root process we put the patch code, so we can just execute the patch code from the kernel, which load by the user space. This is the method A, how we do the kernel module thing, because we basically use two syscalls, init module and finit module. Finit module is the better option because it has two different options, which could be utilized to ignore module CRC checks by the init kernel, also the version magic checks. Some vendors have their own restriction, like Samsung. They have their own kernel module authentication mechanism, which is check the hash value of the kernel module that is being loading, to say if the match the hash value inside the kernel itself. If not, you will not allow the loading process. Here's how we bypass the version magic and the symbol CRC checks. We modify the vermagic.html file. We make a big enough version magic buffer. So we use this buffer to contain any possible version magic string. So we can use the 200 or 300 bytes, and then we copy the kernel version magic string to our kernel module. Also, we can copy the kernel module kernel symbol CRCs to the module, so we can bypass all the checks. All the version magic string and the symbol CRCs are gathered from the boot image we have mentioned that before. And this is how we bypass module structure check. Because we have there are a lot of different configurations like this one, config constructors. There are around 20 different configurations in this structure. So you will make a very different size of the module structure. So we make some padding at the end of this structure, make it bigger enough to contain all possible different structure module size. This is how we bypass Samsung kernel module authentication, you can see that above the red line, there is a jump. It's a being jump. So we just change this line of instruction to a knob. So it will just go directly to the instruction below. So you will so the kernel will be treated to allow the loading. This is another kind of authentication. This happens in a Samsung S4 Lollipop, but it's still same story. It's just check the hash value, those kind of things. So there is an export symbol called LKM auth _ bootload. So if you make this value to 2, which is a boot mode recovery, you can escape all you can cheat the kernel to load to continue load our kernel module. This is another option of how we put our code into the kernel. We call it shellcode injection. Before that, you need some symbols to allocate memory. The first one is vmalloc, you can see, and the second one is the module alloc. The module is the better one because sometimes you need very short distance from your vulnerable functions to your fixed function. If it's short enough, you can make just one instruction to make a jump instead of making 2 or 3 functions which is not atomic. We put our shellcode into a very specific structure, so we know where to load the right shellcode to fix their vulnerabilities. And we also need to allocate memory or reuse some memory. We'll talk about that in later. And we can use a memory device to write or the patch, which is the shellcode, into the memory. Then we trigger the code running from user space. Here's how we allocate the memory in the kernel. We just overwrite the syscall function code with our own shellcode. This small snippet of shellcode actually do the function call vmalloc. You can see it will allocate some chunk of memory from the kernel. There are a lot of you can choose any function calls to modify, but you need to choose a good one, because sometimes you modify some code, and if any other application call that call, it will cause problems. So we are using like a uname, because uname is a very good one because it never crashes. So if you modify the syscall code and the other application call syscall uname, it will just allocate some memories. It won't do anything harmful to the system. All right. See, this is how we trigger the shellcode execution from user space. Basically, we modify the syscall pointer to make it equals to the address of our allocated memory. Then we put the patch code into this memory. Then we call this syscall from a user memory, from user space. Then the old shellcode will be executed. Basically, how we do the patching is like override some function pointers with our own implementation. And also we can patch code directly, like modify some values, especially some static variables in the kernel. Sometimes it needs permissions. On the ARM 32-bit devices, we can use coprocessor to have, like a coprocessor 15. Another important thing we have done is to do the inline hook, because when you are hooking a function, you can hook from the prologue or hook from the middle of the function, which need you save the you need to save some context like register values from in the trampoline. Here's just an example how we hook from the prologue. Actually, we are going to override the first instructions with a B instruction. B is a branch instruction, and this instruction will jump to a patch function, which is our function. And if the distance from a vulnerable function to the patch function is too far away to be contained in a single instruction, you can use LDR. You can use LDR instruction with the address of the patch function. So with that, you can also jump from vulnerable function to the patch function. And the user have the option to choose if to run the origin function or not, because we have set up a trampoline over there, which will save the first instruction. Then we jump back to the second instruction. This inline hook is very painful in ARM 64-bit devices because there is no explicit operation on the PC. What you have to do is like make at least three instructions, which means you have overwrite like four consecutive instructions to do the whole hook thing. Here's some optimization we have done. You can utilize a KO same lookup name to look up the symbol address that you are interested. You don't have to write instruction, write code yourself directly, because that will make the kernel module import a lot of different CRCs. So with this symbol, you can save a lot of loading time. And also you can use some existing kernel memory, kernel function, which are used to write the text segment of the kernel, or the module text segment. And we also can use sometimes those kind of symbols are not always available in current situations. So some devices you have to change the page table yourself with the coprocessor. So you change the permission with the right permission, then you make a necessary change, then you roll back all the change. So with this solution, the problem gets solved. Basically, we gather some kernel information from a device. Then we use the patch data. It could be a kernel module or some shellcode. Then we use the kernel information to transform the data, so we can have a adaptive kernel module or shellcode. So we will make the data suitable for every kernel modules. As you know, kernel solutions need a lot of have very limitations. Like they require source code. This is very bad because you never want to get source code from vendors. It's very hard. Plus, there are tens of thousands of kernels. You don't want to maintain the kernel tree. And with this method, we can load the kernel, load the code to kernel adaptively, so we can minimize the vulnerable devices to very small portion. Here are some famous vulnerability that we have fixed so far, and we actually fixed much more than that. But these are very typical ones, like Taru is very popular. We have seen that before, and Pimpin Root, and CVE 2015, 1805. This is the next Pimpin Root. You probably have heard of that already. The first one is the MAP CV is the typical one is the fragment root. This kind of devices, memory devices have vulnerabilities that can be utilized to map the kernel memory into their user space, so they can change the content of the kernel. With this fix, it will never happen again. So we have successfully evaluated most popular phones like S4, A7, Samsung devices. And anybody here from Samsung? Okay, you're welcome though. And Huawei, you're welcome. And HTC, no, good. Lenovo. And I think you guys recognize your own logos. Okay, here comes some demos. We prepared 2 different demos. Oh. Can you see that?
It's not showing.
Oops. No. Oh, problem happens every time when we are demo. Okay, great. Okay. Yeah, this is how we connect to the device. Then we are using a root binary to get the root permission. This is the Pimpin root. Oh. Oh, okay. So, okay. Okay, we have got the root permission, and the bypass is how is what we have mentioned before. This is a Samsung S4 and KCAT. So we have to patch the some part of the jump in the AKM auth we talked about before. After the patch have succeed, we can load our kernel module into the memory. All right, inner module successful, so we have loaded the module into the memory. And if we try to root the device again, we will never succeed again, right? Module in the memory. Failed. Failed again. Or here comes another. Sorry. We could just play the demo. No? All right, here's another demo about. It's actually it's actually a Chinese vendor's phone. It's what is it? It's a coolpad D1T2. Yeah, you can get the. get the information. Oh, sorry, it's a Chinese, but it doesn't affect the understanding. Yeah, it's CoolPad. KCAT 2.4.4.4. This is first new install of the devices. So if we use root, a famous tool called Kernel, it's a Chinese vendor. We use this root tool to get the root permission from the device, and it will succeed very quick. And this is a routing process. Yeah, succeed. So we get root permission. Now we uninstall the root app, and it will remove all the root permissions. And we reboot. Now we use our app to fix the problem. First, we scan the system. We can figure out there are like 5 different vulnerabilities inside this machine. Now we fix it. Okay, bingo, everything is fixed. Then if we install the root app again, we're trying to root the device again. Take a little bit of time. All right, this is the routing process. It will fail forever. This is actually connected to the Wi-Fi, so it will get all possible routing methods from the cloud. So no matter what it will try to do, it will never succeed to get the root permission again. Actually, you can test with other root binaries. It will still get the same result. We are just using this one because this one is very famous in China. Yeah, no matter what I do, it just fails. It never ends. Okay, so end of the show. Sorry. I will let Yulong take it over from here.
Okay, thanks, Tim. So we have the technology. We can do the adaptive kernel live patching. So what's next? So any technology can be a good weapon, but for this issue, it cannot be fixed in one man's hand. It has to be a joint effort. So recall the 2 problems that we talked about. The first one is the long patching chain. So with this kernel live patching, we can shorten the patching chain with 1 step. For the capability mismatching issue, we have to call out both the vendor and security researchers to work together to generate the patch and apply the patch. We believe that both parties have incentives to do this. For vendors, if they have more secure products, they can have more sales and more users. For security providers, they can gain reputation and profits, like the white hat sitting here in this room. But this is not easy. In the current stage, as Tim just showed, we are building this kernel adaptive live patching in an app. The app tries to, first of all, scan all the existing vulnerabilities in the kernel. And then it will try to root the phone by exploiting those vulnerabilities. With the root privilege, it can then apply the patches. The second alternative is to use existing root. For example, some app may have already rooted the phone and provide the SU binary, the SU service. So we can call the SU service to gain root and apply the patches. But the first 2 methods are not ideal. The ideal way is to let vendor give our privilege to do the kernel adaptive live patching. So only in this way, we no longer have to worry about like root the phone. And we don't have to worry about some overhead in this step. So if the vendor can integrate the adaptive kernel method privilege or framework in their own firmware and pre-embed kernel agent we can directly call, then this can be very easy. So in a nutshell, the ecosystem will look like this. In the core is, of course, the vendor qualification. Not everyone can contribute the kernel patch because kernel patch is quite like sensitive. If anyone can contribute a live patch, that would be a disaster because everyone can plan like backdoors or new vulnerabilities into the kernel. So we have to do like qualification. Only the vendors with good reputation, with good size, with like good history can contribute the live patches. And the second layer is the signature-based patch distribution. So anyone want to publish a live patch into the framework, into the platform, it has to sign the patches first. And later, the coordinator, right now it's Baidu, will sign the patch again to ensure that the patch can be released to the platform. And third layer is the security vetting. So Baidu will do the vetting in the first stage. But later, all the vendors have to do cross-validation on the patches. Because kernel patches, as I said, is quite sensitive. And it is hard to ensure that it's 100% clean and not vulnerable. And the last layer, and which is most important layer, is the reputation ranking. So we want to make this similar to App Store, to the iOS App Store, that the user can pick the live patches from the user interface. And he can see the ranking. The ranking includes the vendor's ranking or other users' ranking of this patch. For example, how good the reputation the vendor is, or how stable this patch is on other users' phone on the same model. So by combining this 1, 2, 3, 4 layers together, we want to establish the ecosystem based on the adaptive kernel patching framework we just described. So we are still on the early stage. There are some other schedules that will be announced this fall. The first is the ecosystem alliance. As we just said, we will do a vendor qualification. So right now we are reaching out to the major phone vendors and Google and other Chinese big names to join this effort. And the second one, we are trying to provide a more flexible and easy to review patching mechanism. So that's all about our presentation. Thank you, and questions are welcomed. Any questions? Yes.
I'm wondering, do we have to patch run the patches after each release, or what time?
Right now, the question is whether we allow the permanent fix or just allow the one-time fix. I think the core of the question is whether we modify the binary. If we modify the binary after the reboot, the problem is gone. If we don't apply the change to the binary and just change the code in the memory, it's just immutable for now. If the user reboots, the problem will come again. Well, we think that this is not a decision that can be made on all the devices. For some devices, like Samsung devices, if we change the binary, the fuse will be burned because it has the mechanism to check the hash of the system image. If the system image, the hash changes, it will burn the fuse, and the warranty will be avoided. So for such devices, we have to ask the user to choose whether you want to make the fix permanent or you just want to make a one-time fix. For other devices that doesn't have this problem, we will recommend the user to do the permanent fix. From the technical wise, we can do the permanent or temporary fix. No problem at all. Yeah, thank you.
Hello. Do you already talk to some vendors and get some reactions or
Yeah.
about the idea?
Yes.
Okay.
That's a good question because everyone asks us this question.
Yeah.
Some vendors is not quite happy about this idea because by injecting code into their kernel, they think it's not like a stable way, or maybe they don't trust us to put code in their logic. But some vendors are quite happy about this because they also care about the user's security, but they don't have a good methods to patch the vulnerability out there immediately. For those vendors, mostly Chinese vendors, we are trying to make the process faster to make them join this effort. For those vendors that are not happy with this solution, we're trying to persuade them and try to demo the effect. So hopefully they will change their mind.
Thank you.
I'm sort of leaning onto that question a little bit, and I'm aware that you're not maybe the person to answer it, but I'm wondering after the talk, this is commendable effort, right? First of all, this is very, very nice, very good as an idea. But I'm wondering, people don't trust the vendors, they don't trust the providers. Why would they trust Baidu? Baidu is like Chinese Google. Google says they're not evil, and I don't think that people buy it that are in the conference that Google maybe not evil but not good either. Nobody is determined about. So Baidu is similar, and it's a great effort. As I said, it sounds really good. Why should I believe you? Why will anybody believe each other, right? How are you going to break that? What did you think about it? Did you have any plan on it?
Yeah, this is a free market. Just like other vendors, there's no one can be trusted. But we're trying to make this problem solvable for user to choose. Right now, even the user want to secure their phone, they have no choice. We just want to provide a choice for them to choose from. But after installation of the demo app, as we just shown, we will list all the kernel vulnerabilities on the phone. The user can ignore them, just ignore the existence of their vulnerabilities, and not to apply the patches from Baidu or from other vendors providing the live patch. The situation is not worse than their current situation because the vulnerabilities are there, right? Yeah, so the attacker can exploit these vulnerabilities to gain root instead of us, right? So we just provide a solution to make them getting better. So this is a choice for them. And also, this is a free market. They can choose it or not choose it. We don't force them to apply the patches.
Maybe it's just the nature of the business, so I'm overly paranoid. I don't know, maybe that's just a question.
Oh, that's a good question, though. Yeah. Oh, by the way, the user can only install the patches. They have freedom to get rid of the patches if they are not happy with the results.
Not even I read everything actually. So the average user, are they going to read and check the patches and everything? Nah, they'll just click. Right?
Yeah.
Any further question, guys? No? Well, then I conclude track 2. Thank you all. Please
Thank
give
you
a
all,
warm
guys.
applause
Thank you.
Tim and Yulong. And I hope to see you guys tomorrow.